Week 4 NFL main slate. Let's do it, guys. We have 12 games on this slate. If you are a first-time viewer, welcome to my channel. My name is DK. I do cover content for Draftkings and for Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the sponsor of today's video. If you guys are a first-time user, you can use the code DKDFS for a 100% match up to $100. Basically, you deposit $100 using my code, you'll get a free $100 to play with on the site. So take advantage of that if you are a first-time user. As far as my prize pick plays go, went last week, went 4 for 5, so another great week, and we swept the board the week before. So now 9 of 10, the last 2 main slates. A little bit unfortunate that we went 1 for 2 in the free picks. Dotson went under, even though it just, like, Carson Wentz, like 3 completions in the first half. Like, how is that even possible? How? But yeah, went 9 for 10, phenomenal week on prize picks. And one thing to mention, too, I now am offering a Prize Picks only package. If you guys are interested in that, you can check that out. Again, linked in the description below. And yeah, recapping a couple other things. So we had a Patreon user get first place in the showdown the other night. So congrats there. And then let's recap my lineup from the main slate. And got pretty unlucky here. You know, if David Montgomery does not get injured, it's looking like a great week for me. But I still cashed pretty easily in my higher stakes tournaments, even with an injured David Montgomery finishing with 1 fantasy point. So let's kind of talk through my process. What I always do on Patreon is we first go over the chalk build, the cash game build, which I talked about, was Hurts, Montgomery, Fournette, those 2 7K wide receivers in Diggs and St. Brown. You look to Mac Hollins. It was like, we first go over the chalk build, and then I talk about, all right, how am I going to try to get different on the slate? I told everyone I'm getting pretty contrarian on this slate because there's a few reasons, right? I knew a lot of people in tournaments would look to that Bills-Dolphins game. So I wanted to look to another, relatively high total game that was kind of going overlooked. And I thought that was the Chiefs game. And this game really, really tilted me because I think we had like 3 punts down at the 1-yard line. Obviously, that's really going to hurt the offenses and just the flow of the game in general. You also had, I thought Kelsey had 2 drop touchdowns. Maybe it was only 1, but I could have sworn he dropped 2 touchdowns. So I had the low-owned Mahomes Kelsey stack. If he catches one of those touchdowns, it's even a bigger week. Paired him with Juju and ran it back with Michael Pittman. So that was, relatively low on stack, right? All like sub 10% owned on those guys. The key here, though, was Devin Singletary, one that I was all over in tournaments. Talked about this a lot on Sunday morning in the Discord. How I really liked him. I liked him as a leverage spot, too, off of massive chalk digs, right? Because that was one of the things we talked about, for, what was, quote unquote, the optimal build. Well, Stephon Diggs was, before the slate locked, was going to be, in everyone's optimal, cash build. And we knew he was going to be very, very popular. I was like, all right, if I'm going to go underweight to this Bills-Dolphins game, why don't I just leverage everyone's playing Diggs, I'm just going to leverage it with Devin Singletary. And the reason he was so low owned, too, is because he didn't do a ton the first couple weeks, but actually the opportunities were there, especially if you paid attention Monday night, week 2. The game was a massive, massive blowout, right? But these are the snaps before Josh Allen got pulled. Devin Singletary played on 66% of the snaps. Now, if you looked at the snap counts overall at the end of that game, I don't know it was probably like sub 50% because James Cook just played the entire fourth quarter. But when the game was at least somewhat in reach, you kind of saw a shift from week 1, right? Week 1, you saw pretty clear, Moss, Singletary, somewhat split. James Cook got a couple snaps, but this week, Singletary got a pretty big increase in the games that were in competitive. And like I said, he didn't do a ton with the opportunities, got a bit unlucky, but I saw an opportunity there with Devin Singletary. Again, talked about that a lot in the Discord. And yeah, it worked out in a big, big way. Again, he was 0.6% in one tournament, 0.9% in the other. But yeah, so I really like Singletary's leverage spot GBPs, leveraging with super low on Singletary. and it worked out very, very well. So I talk about this a lot on DraftKings, but you have to, like, if you can identify spots like this where the field is kind of missing a player, because there's a guy in that range. Obviously, Montgomery was chalk, but there's another guy in Miles Sanders who picked up he was 30%, I saw in high stakes. Why was Miles Sanders 30% and Devin Singletary is 0.5%, right? Because it's not like Miles Sanders is a bell cow back either, but he got literally all the ownership, right? And we another situation, right, week 2, where I was all over Jake Kumro. Everyone thought it was, the slot wide receivers have been playing out wide. No, Kumro basically played the entire game at 2% ownership. So when you can identify spots like that in tournaments, you can be very, very successful as a GPP player. But yeah, that was my reasoning for going to Singletary. And then I also really liked Romeo Doubs as a pivot off of massive chalk Matt Collins. Unfortunately, massive chalk Matt Collins just goes for like 300 yards and a touchdown when his role doesn't change with Hunter Renfrow being out. That really tilted me. But yeah, I was all over Romeo Doubs. He had a great day, but didn't outscore Matt Collins because he just had the game of his life. And then I went to Bashard Perriman as well as a value play. Rounded out with the Panthers defense, so I thought they were going to be relatively popular in tournaments, but I had such a contrarian lineup that I was just fine because there wasn't really a defense. I needed a cheap defense, and there wasn't really anyone below the Panthers that I wanted to play. And then it really surprised me. There were Panthers like 5 to 10% owned. So maybe just the field overreacted. We all thought they were going to be very popular, and they ended up not being popular. But yeah, that was the review of my lineup, guys. Hopefully you had a good week. Again, it was a great week. Would have been a bigger week if Montgomery did not get injured. But yeah, let's go. Again, we'll go team by team. So we'll start it off with Cleveland. Quarterback, I'm not really looking to Brissett. Once again, so I'll just point this out really quick. I'm going to be spending up a quarterback. I've been on this trend for over a year now of just the top, 5, 6 quarterbacks are just have so much more upside than the rest of the field. I'll let the field continue to try to chase those low, cheap quarterbacks. I'm just gonna be looking to the top end guys. So really, I'm not looking at any cheap quarterbacks. I'll mention a couple that are playable, but I'll most likely be spending up quarterback once again. Running back, we have Chubb and Hunt. It's going to be a split. Obviously, Chubb is going to get more of the early down work. Kareem Hunt more of the passing down work. This is actually a relatively high total game. So, I mean, you can consider both the Cleveland backs in tournaments, but they're definitely not cash game plays. A wide receiver, so I put Amari Cooper on the showdown slate over massive chalk Nick Chubb. He still outscored him, even though Chubb got lucky and not vulture, but if Kareem Hunt just could have scored one of those runs inside the 5, 3 inside the 5 runs, I would have been making massive money in that showdown, but yeah, that's another tilt if you guys want to check out my previous showdown video. But yeah, Amari Cooper, 6.3K. He's their clear wide receiver 1. This is a relatively high total game. I think he's a solid option, more of a tournament play for me, just because Cleveland's still run first team, but still like his upside. Peoples-Jones still got a lot of snaps. If you take a look at snap counts for Cleveland, he did play 63 of the 72 snaps. He's 4K. He had a pretty big week 1, I guess 11 targets, but he's kind of been quiet the last couple weeks. And then David Njoku, I mentioned I really liked him in the showdown, and he had a great bounce back. The snaps were there. He was another one, right? The snaps were there for him the first 2 weeks. The production just wasn't. And he was running a ton of routes, and then we finally saw the big game from him, 9 catches and 10 targets. Now, I don't think we can expect that in a touchdown, so I still think he's a solid tight end play, but might be a bit overowned because of the big week last week. For Atlanta, so if you're looking to spend down a quarterback, I think Mariota is one of the guys I would consider just because he's a guy that can get it done on the ground. 5.6K, I think he's fine. Running back, Cordarrelle Patterson is kind of splitting touches right now. Tyler Algier. Patterson is a guy that can get it done through the air. Again, fine in tournaments. Wide receiver, Drake London, 6'1", I think is a decent GBP play. He is basically the only wide receiver I trust in this offense right now. Zakia snaps did go up last week, but still don't think it's necessary to go to him at 4.1. There's other cheap wide receivers I prefer. And Kyle Pitts also could have had a big week. Mariota missed him on a bomb. Otherwise, he would have had over 100 yards and a touchdown. 5K, I think he is, once again, playable in both formats there. Buffalo and Baltimore. So this is a game that's going to be very popular, but for good reason, right? What's the total in this one? We have 52 for the Bills and Ravens. Both defenses are dealing with some injuries. Josh Allen, great play in both formats. He threw 63 times last game. That is absolutely absurd. He can get it done on the ground as well. He looks great. Now, Devin Singletary, we're not going to get him at 0.6% ownership again. after the big week for him. But I don't think we can expect 11 targets again. But I still think he's, viable in tournaments. He's still not going to be a true bell cow. But if we're going to get like 70% of the snaps for Devin Singletary in the highest total game of the week, I think he's definitely viable at a sub 6K price point. We're not going to get him at what I played him at ownership last week. Wide receiver, Stephon Diggs, not worried about it. It was just cramping. He's definitely a good spend up wide receiver. Should get a lot of targets in a game that, again, has expected to have a lot of points. Gabe Davis did play a ton of snaps, only had 6 targets, but still a guy that I think looks good and does have a ceiling. And then you kind of saw McKenzie and Crowder split the slot snaps for Buffalo last game. Both played about half the game. McKenzie was much more productive. Again, I think he just has a little bit of a higher ceiling, but I don't think we can expect 21 fantasy points from him again. Dawson Knox, I think, is an interesting buy low candidate here. He has yet to score a touchdown, but he's still playing majority of the game, right? This is what I like to see from tight ends. He's playing a majority of the game. He did have to leave a little bit, or leave the game for a bit due to cramping. He's also dealing with a bit of a foot injury, but I think he's an interesting buy low candidate there in a high total game that hasn't yet to have a big week, but the opportunities are there for him. Baltimore, Lamar Jackson is going to be very popular, but for good reason. I think he's playable in both formats. 100 yards in the ground, back-to-back games, high total game. Don't think we had to spend a ton of time on me telling you that Lamar Jackson's a good play. Running back, you saw Dobbins and Justice Hill split the snaps. Both are playable in tournaments. I mean, Justice Hill is a flat end price 4K. I just don't trust the Ravens and what they're going to do for running back, so just tournament options there. Wide receiver, just tournament plays here too with Bateman and Duvernay. The downside of Baltimore is they are a run-first team, and they're definitely not playing their main wide receivers a ton. I'm trying to find where I Baltimore at. So you saw 37 of the 59 snaps for Bateman, and then 35 of the 59 for Duvernay. So again, they're just tournament plays. Andrews, if you have the salary for him, looks great. He's their clear top option. Double-digit targets on back-to-back weeks. Playable in both formats, in my opinion. Washington and Dallas. Carson Wentz, I'll pass on him at 6K. Gibson is strictly game flow dependent. You saw Washington fall behind early. You saw J.D. McKissic get a ton of snaps. So if you think Washington's playing from ahead in this game, you can look to Gibson. If you think they fall behind, you can maybe take a shot on J.D. McKissic, who will be utilized in the passing game. Wide receiver, the positive with Washington, which I like, is they're basically playing 3 wide receivers the entire game. McLaurin, Samuel, and Dotson. Samuel has been their top wide receiver through 3 weeks, playing in the slot, double-digit targets. I think he's fine. The price is now slowly coming up on him. McLaurin did have a decent week last week. Still hasn't had like the really big game yet, but the ceiling is definitely the highest on him. And rookie Jahan Dotson, still getting a lot of opportunities and is the cheapest. I think all 3 wide receivers are in play here for me for the Commanders. And at tight end, Logan Thomas is a fine, cheap tight end play. Should play over half the game, is running a lot of routes, so he's fine. Dallas, I'll pass on Cooper Rush. Running backs, it's going to be split between Zeke and Pollard. Both are just tournament plays for me. Wide receiver, I do like CeeDee Lamb. Double-digit targets through 3 weeks is their clear wide receiver 1. Gallup expected to be back here, so I'm probably going to stay away from the secondary wide receivers for Dallas. I don't know if Gallup's going to play, full allotment of snaps either, so that hurts Noah Brown. Definitely takes away from like Tolbert too, who got a little bit of run last game. I'm just not really messing with anyone behind CeeDee Lamb. At tight end, keep an eye on Dalton Schultz if he misses. You have 2 viable punt plays here in Ferguson and Hendershot. So Ferguson outsnapped Hendershot. They basically ran the same routes last game, though. They're both 2.5K, so keep an eye on that one. If Schultz plays, I do think he's a decent play at 3.9K, assuming no limitations. Seattle and Detroit, once again, I'm not looking at Geno Smith. Rashad Penny, however, did see a pretty big snap increase in basically a neutral game script. He saw 49 of the 71 running back snaps, and then you saw a couple for Homer, 15 for DJ Dallas, who got the third down work, only 9 for Kenneth Walker. My issue is Kenneth Walker looked good with his touches, right? He had nine snaps only, but 6 touches, 3 carries for 19 yards, and 3 catches on 14 yards. I would think they want to get him a little bit more involved. I do think, though, Penny is in consideration, especially if you think Seattle's going to be playing from ahead in this game. He will be more of the early down back, so he's in play, sub 5K. Wide receiver, I think the main wide receivers look decent here in a good matchup with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Both are basically going to play the entire game. You have 6.8K for Metcalf, 5.9K for Lockett in a good matchup. I like them both. I'm not going to mess with the tight end situation, though, for Seattle. On the Detroit side, Jared Goff's fine. I mentioned him as a viable punt play last week. He did decent. Running back, DeAndre Swift is expected to be out for a couple weeks. I'd be pretty surprised if he plays. Now, That's going to make Jamal Williams pretty popular. But again, assuming Swift is out, I think Jamal Williams is a good play in both formats. However, I'm not convinced he's going to be a bell cow. I'm not convinced Jamal Williams is going to play 90% of the snaps. I think what happens here is you're going to see a good chunk of snaps for Craig Reynolds as well, who saw 6 carries and 1 target last week. So I think Jamal Williams kind of hovers in that 60 to 70% of the snap range, where Craig Reynolds gets the rest. So Williams, I think, is a good play. Maybe a little bit over-owned in tournaments. I think he's like a good cash game play. Makes for an interesting fade in tournaments, especially if he's going to be very, very popular. Because again, I'm not convinced he's all of a sudden going to be a bell cow back in this Lions offense. Wide receiver, we'll keep an eye on the injury news here, where St. Brown and Reynolds both got a little bit banged up. Assuming all 3 play of the starting wide receivers with Brown, Chark, and Reynolds, I'm not really looking to the mid-range wide receivers. I would say St. Brown would still be a good play in both formats. Just going to get a ton of targets. Got a little bit banged up, like I said, but I'm not super worried about his status. And Hockenson 4-1, I think is a solid, cheap tight end play. Still playing majority of the game. Has yet to really have that big week, though. Chargers and Houston. Herbert, 7.1K. I mean, a lot of the field is, probably just going to avoid this spot. He didn't look great. Obviously dealing with the ribs, but I think he at least makes for an interesting GPP play, because I think a lot of people are going to avoid him after they just got destroyed by Jacksonville. Running back, I mean, Eckler is very involved in the pass game. However, he's still not getting a ton of snaps, hovering around just over 50% of the snaps. So I would say more of a tournament play for me. Wide receiver, Keenan Allen expected to be back, so that kind of hurts Josh Palmer. Assuming no limitations, then Keenan Allen would probably be my favorite there. And then Everett, 4K, kind of just indifferent on him. Houston, I'm not looking at Davis Mills. Dameon Pierce, I think, is fish food on the slate. I think he'll be a bit over-owned. My worry here is, I know he got 20 carries and a basically neutral game script, did have 2 targets, but you basically saw all the third down work for Rex Burkhead. He saw 24 snaps and was out there in 16 passing plays, where Dameon Pierce played 35 snaps, was only out there in 9 passing plays. So not a great offense. Dameon Pierce looking like it's just going to be an early down back. I think it'll be a bit over-owned. Everyone likes playing Dameon Pierce. I'll probably fade in tournaments. Wide receiver, Brandon Cooks, basically the only guy I trust right now. Didn't do much last week. Still saw 7 targets, though. I think is a okay option there in the mid-range. Tennessee, I mean, this Tennessee team is just so gross. They're spreading out the snaps at wide receiver. Derrick Henry, 8.3K. I mean, you can always consider him in tournaments, but it's very game flow dependent. And if Kyle Phillips is out, I think Treylon Burks would probably be the only guy I would consider. But still, the guy that played the most amount of snaps was Robert Woods, and he played 42 of the 57 snaps. So they're still mixing in these backup wide receivers, which is a bit concerning. But yeah, if there's no Kyle Phillips, Burks would probably be the guy I'd look to, a 4-7. But I still don't really trust anyone. I'm not really looking at the tight ends either. So Tennessee, basically just been a full fade in them all season for me. Moving on to the Colts, Matt Ryan I'll pass on. Jonathan Taylor did miss practice today. It's only Wednesday, though, so I'm not super worried about it. If for some reason he does miss the game, obviously you can look to Nyheim Hines, who would make for a great value play. But assuming Taylor plays, I think he's playable in both formats. The workload is there. However, the production has not been there the last couple of games. But still a guy that should get a lot of touches in this offense. Wide receiver, Michael Pittman, really the only guy I trust. 7.2K. The price is coming up, but he's basically going to play the entire game. Below that, I mean, Paris Campbell still played a lot of snaps. If you wanted to try to buy low on him, I guess it's in consideration. I played him week 2 when he was out there the entire game, and he literally didn't have a catch without Michael Pittman. But in a Millie Maker format, can you consider 3.4K Paris Campbell, who played 58 of the 71 snaps? Yes, you can. Tight ends, they're playing 3 guys. I'll pass there. All right, Chicago and New York, another ugly game. Fields, I mean, they're just not passing the ball. Can they just air it out more, please? But yeah, this is pretty ugly. The only positive here is he's going to get it done on the ground. If you think all of a sudden Chicago falls behind early in this game, they have to air it out, I could see Fields having a decent game at a cheap price point. So if you see this game where the Giants get ahead early, I think you can at least make the argument for Justin Fields in tournaments. Running back, this is pretty big news to keep an eye on. Montgomery did not practice on Wednesday. He left early in the game last week. Obviously, it got really hurt me in tournaments. If he misses, Khalil Herbert's going to be a great play in both formats. We've got 20 carries on the ground. So this is huge. If Montgomery ends up playing, the only way I'd probably stay away from this backfield is if Montgomery ends up playing, but they limit him, and then that would just kind of hurt both backs. If Montgomery plays and no limitations, I like him here against the Giants. If Montgomery misses, you can look at Khalil Herbert, who's going to be very popular in both formats. Wide receiver, I mean, you can take a shot in Mooney, like I said, in tournaments. If you wanted a super, super low-owned stack, you can look to Fields, Mooney. Mooney's playing the entire game. It's just this team is not passing right now. But if the Bears fall behind like 2-3 scores in this game, I could see, that low-owned stack winning some money. And then Komet, like I said, he's playing a ton of snaps, but they're just not passing. Giants, I mean, Daniel Jones is running the ball a decent amount. Like, I'll mention him as a viable, cheap quarterback play. 6, 10, and 9 targets now, or 6, 10, and 9 carries through 3 games. Like, that's definitely going to boost his floor a bit, but this game just projected to be pretty ugly. Saquon Barkley, good play in both formats. He's just a bell cow back that's involved in the passing game. So even though this game is projected to be ugly, I think he's a decent play in both formats. Wide receiver, I think we can get some value here. So Shepard, obviously out for the season, feels so bad for the guy. He's had the worst injury luck. Tony and Reddle Robinson did not practice on Wednesday. I would say they are more on the doubtful side. So what do I expect for wide receivers here? Well, I expect the starting wide receivers to be Galladay and Sills in the outside with Richie James mixing in the slot. There's no guarantee, though. They could mix in some Slayton with Galladay, though. I think the wide receiver I feel the most comfortable with, assuming that Tony and Reddle Robinson don't play, is probably Richie James in the slot, who should play a decent amount of the game and, again, is relatively cheap. But these cheap Giants wide receivers are in play, and Sills and Galladay, too. So there are some salary relief plays here that I think are viable for the Giants. And then Daniel Bellinger has played a bit more recently. Did have 5 targets last week. Is only 2.8K. Jags and Eagles. This is another game that could be a shootout. Trevor Lawrence at 5.7, at least in consideration on the cheap end. Running back, you're seeing a split between Robinson and Etienne. I know Robinson had a big week last week. Actually, through 3 weeks, he's been pretty good, but I don't trust it, especially with Etienne mixing in on passing down situations as well. So Robinson kind of feels like a chase to me. I'm just not convinced he's going to have that level of production throughout the year. Wide receiver, though, there are some viable cheap options, which I'll mention. But first, Christian Kirk, 6.6K. I mean, he's their clear wide receiver 1 playing in the slot, getting a ton of targets. I think he's fine. But these 2 cheap end guys, Marvin Jones and Zay Jones, are both solid options as well. Both these guys should play around 70% or so of the game. 6, 5, and 7 targets for Marvin Jones Jr. through 3 weeks. And then Zay Jones had a big week last week, 11 targets. So I think both those guys look pretty good for salary relief options. Evan Ingram is still running a ton of routes. Did have a touchdown call back in that game. A 3.4K, I think, is at least playable. On the Eagles side, so, I mean, Jalen Hurts, like I said, this is what I'm talking about with these spend-up quarterbacks just having such a high ceiling. Guys like Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, I'm probably going to play one of those 3 guys. I probably am. And Jalen Hurts, you can't go wrong with him. Very involved in the running game, has looked pretty good through the air. This is a good matchup as well. I think he looks really good. Miles Sanders was pretty popular last week, did have a letdown game. Again, he's not a true bell cow back, but this is a good matchup. The only issue is, again, Boston Scott getting some goal line carries, Gainwell getting the third down work. So that's the worry there with Sanders. At wide receiver, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are in play. Both going to play a majority of the game. Devontae Smith has been phenomenal last couple weeks after putting up a donut. I think he's probably the wide receiver I like the best for the Eagles. I'm not really looking to Quez Watkins in the slot. You did see Zach Pascal played a good chunk more last game, so I'll stay away from the slot wide receiver. Then Dallas Goedert, I think, is a solid tight end play in both formats. He did have to leave the game for a bit, but came back. Should play a majority of the game here, 4.5K. All right, Jets and Eagles, or Jets and Steelers, I should say. Zach Wilson if he's clear to go, he will start at 5.2K. Again, you can consider him. Running back, you're seeing a split between Hall and Carter. Both are involved in the passing game. I don't really think you can play these guys in a cash game setting, but for tournaments, they're fine. I mean, I know if Zach Wilson plays, maybe they don't get as many dump offs. So Joe Flacco's just been dumping it off these guys so much through 3 weeks. But full point PPR, I think both the Jets backs are in play. Basically split backfield, but they're fine tournament plays for me. Wide receiver, you have Wilson, Moore, and Davis. Wilson has played the least of the 3 playing in the slot, but he's been their most productive wide receiver. Moore is 4.8K, an interesting buy low opportunity here. Did have 10 targets last week. Not really interested in Corey Davis. And then Tyler Conklin, 3.6K. I mean, you saw Uzoma was active, but didn't do much. Conklin still played like the entire game and is their clear tight end 1, and the Jets are playing from behind a lot. So I think he's a viable salary relief play. For the Steelers, Mitch Trubisky, 5.1. Again, probably not going to go there. At running back, you did see a snap increase for Najee Harris, who played a majority of the game, did a 15 carries and 3 catches on 3 targets. Good matchup against the Jets. I think he's a pretty good option in the mid-range. You will see Warren mix in a bit, but this is still Harris's backfield. Wide receiver, these guys are relatively cheap. Deontay Johnson at 6K. I like in both formats. again, we know we're going to get from Deontay Johnson. Double-digit targets. I think he's a pretty good play. And then Claypool is playing majority of the game in the slot. I think he's an okay salary relief play. My boy, George Pickens, had a phenomenal one-handed catch. I mean, he was open a few times, too. 3.8K. We have yet to see the big game from Pickens. You're going to see, I think, a breakout game soon from him. I kind of like trying to buy low at 3.8K on George Pickens. Arizona and Carolina. So are we just going to see the Cardinals fall behind 3 scores every single game? I mean, if that's the case, it's great for the passing attack, right? I mean, it's like it happens. It's happened now through 3 weeks. They just fall behind big time and then just have to air it out. Kyler Murray, though, I just don't think you can trust him in a cash game. You could consider him for tournaments. Running back James Conner, did get a majority of the running back snap. 6.3K, I think, is a solid GPP play. Wide receiver, there's some question marks here. So AJ Green, doubtful. Dortch has been good. He was limited in practice, though, and we do have Rondale Moore expected to be back. So the question here is, do they go 3 wide receiver sets with Brown, Dortch, and Moore? Or does Moore and Dortch split the slot snaps, meaning would hurt both of them? And then you see maybe some Andy Isabella out wide. So that's the question here, like what the Cardinals do. If they do a situation where Dortch and Moore split the slot snaps and you see Andy Isabella playing a lot out wide, you can look to him in a Millie Maker setting at 3.3K. But yeah, Hollywood Brown, definitely the safest target here. Had 17 targets last week. I think that was a bit of an outlier, but still like him there at that price point. And then, I mean, so if you think that Rondale Moore is going to get all the slot snaps at 3.8K, you can definitely look to him. It's just a question of, what exactly are the Cardinals going to do? Are they going to play 3 wide receiver sets with Moore, Dortch, and Brown? Or does Dortch and Moore split the slot snaps, which would hurt both? Zach Ertz, I like quite a bit. I mean, he played basically the entire game last game and did have 10 targets. He's running a ton of routes right now. I like him in both formats. On the Carolina side, no thank you on Baker. McCaffrey didn't practice. I'm not super worried about it, though. He's missed all the Wednesday practices so far. I think he's a good play in both formats. He's just never going to leave the field. And this is a great matchup as well. 25 carries last game in a game that they were playing from ahead. So like McCaffrey in both formats. The wide receivers, Moore and Anderson, are fine tournament plays. It's just hard to trust his passing attack right now. I'm not looking at the tight ends either. New England and Green Bay, so expected that Brian Hoyer's going to start. No thank you there. Running backs, I mean, they're big dogs here. Harrison, Stevenson, just dart throws in tournaments. Wide receiver, Myers is expected to be back here for this game. He would really be the only guy I would trust for New England at wide receiver. No thank you on the tight ends. Green Bay, so I'll pass on Aaron Rodgers at 6'3". The running backs in game, they should be playing from ahead. Both Jones and Dillon are fine tournament plays. I slightly prefer Dillon for the discount. At wide receiver, if Watson does not play, I think Romeo Doubs is a very good, cheap wide receiver play. You basically saw Lazard and Doubs play the entire game, and then Cobb kind of play some in the slot. But yeah, if there's no Watson, I like both the main wide receivers here for Green Bay. I think it's much easier to get to Doubs. I'll pass on the tight ends. Finally, Denver. Russell Wilson is just still too pricey for me. At running back, I mean, why are we playing Mike Boone? Why is this a 3-headed monster now? Why is Mike Boone getting snaps? No thank you on the running backs here for Denver. Wide receiver, Sutton is the guy that I like. I think he's a solid play in both formats. Has established himself as the wide receiver 1. I know Judy's been a bit banged up. You also didn't see a full lot of snaps for Jerry Jeudy last game, but I think Sutton's a solid play in both formats. Judy did not see the entire game. Basically saw about half the game. That does worry me a little bit. More of a tournament-only play. No thank you on the slot wide receivers there. I'm also going to pass in the tight ends. 4 guys playing for Denver. Finally, the Raiders, no thank you on Derek Carr. Running back Josh Jacobs, 5'5", I do think is fine. Did have 6 targets last week. You are seeing Brandon Bolden, though, playing a lot of the passing down situation. So if this is a game that you think the Raiders play from ahead, then I think Josh Jacobs would be a pretty good, cheap running back play there. Wide receiver, Renfrow, once again, did not practice. So, I mean, you're going to see Adams and Matt Collins line up out wide. I think Matt Collins is going to be very, very popular. I'm just not convinced all of a sudden Matt Collins is one of the best wide receivers in the game, right? 8 catches, 158 yards, and a touchdown for Matt Collins? Come on now, right? So, I think he makes for a very good fade in tournaments. You can play him in cash games. Sure, he's going to play the entire game, but the guy that actually gets the snap increase if Renfrow doesn't play is Keelan Cole. Played a good chunk of snaps, dropped a touchdown too. So he dropped a touchdown, and the next play, chalk Matt Collins catches a touchdown, which is so tilting. But min price Keelan Cole played 40 of the 70 snaps. If Renfrow, once again, doesn't play, yes, you can consider him in a Millie Maker format. And then tight end, Darren Waller is 5.6K. The snaps haven't been as good on him lately, but I think he's just like a neutral play for me in the mid-range. All right, guys, that is the team-by-team breakdown, and that's going to wrap it up for the video. Again, if you have been enjoying, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. I appreciate all you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.